Welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to talk about being a late bloomer. I already made a video talking about how I moved out of my mom's house and then I moved back in, and how now I'm in my 30s, struggling, feeling like a failure, and what I learned and what I want to teach you. So I grew up in a single parent household. My father wasn't really a part of my life growing up. My mom raised me and my sister by herself. I give it to her that is very hard for a mother to raise two kids by herself and also raising a young boy into being a man. Now, because of the family dynamic, I feel like my family was really unbalanced. So, only one parent cooking, cleaning, raising us, teaching us valuable life skills. I feel like there's a certain point where I had to realize my mom can't teach me everything. And that came at a cost because I felt like I grew up kind of sheltered. And this isn't in a mean way. I'm not like trying to bash my mom or talk negatively about her, but I'm also being very honest about my journey and how it's affected me. I didn't have a job until I was 19 years old. I feel like a lot of people start working when they're around the ages 16 to 18. I didn't have that experience. So growing up, the concept of working, getting a driver's license, getting a car or learning how to drive, traveling, dating, sex, a lot of these things weren't really taught to me. So we learned about sex and being careful and dating, but a lot of these things just weren't encouraged. So while a lot of my classmates were working at 17, they had their first jobs, they were saving money, I knew nothing about that. And I think it may have had to do with the fact that my mom and my grandma were Jehovah's Witnesses. So I think some of that kind of trickled in or factored into my mom's parenting style. I think I got my first job at 19 and it was very hard to look for work. I remember being out there, going door to door. Hey, are you hiring? Hey, are you guys hiring? And I had no job experience. I didn't even know how to make a resume. I didn't even know what goes on a resume. So whenever I would ask people for help, I would get very conflicting answers. People would say, oh, you need to have an objective. Then they would say, oh, you need to have a skill category, like the languages you speak, what apps you can use on a computer, like can you use Microsoft, can you use ADP or whatever. So I was very overwhelmed looking for a job. I would apply to Macy's, I would go to frozen yogurt stores, I would go to coffee shops, and I went to a coffee shop once, and I'll never forget it. It was called Chow for Now. They're closed now, I've never seen them since then, but when I first went in, I said, hey, are you guys hiring? And then the manager, I'm assuming she was the manager, she's like, oh yeah, for sure. Do you like coffee? And I'm like, yeah, I love coffee. I drink coffee every day. And I felt like I was doing good. I'm very outgoing. I love talking to people. And she's like, do you have experience? And I said, no, but I'm willing to learn and I'm very receptive to feedback. I like being around people. Like, I think this would be the perfect job for me. And she said, the thing is, like, what if I hire you and then I tell you, hey, I need a cappuccino. And then you're like, what's a cappuccino? So me being like this 17-year-old guy, I didn't really know how to react. I wasn't really good at having an answer like on the spot and just not having confidence in general. But I said, well, with all respect, how do you expect me to get experience if you don't hire me? How does one get experience without getting hired? You have to start somewhere. And she said, oh, no, for sure, for sure, for sure. But I think you should start somewhere smaller. And I'm looking around the cafe and I'm like, lady, this is a 400 square foot cafe. It doesn't get much smaller than this. But I was like, okay, thank you for your time. And I left. And I felt like giving up, but I kept going, and I would go into every store. Are you hiring? Are you hiring? I'm looking for a job. And that went on for like maybe 4 months or 5 months. I got my first job at a coffee shop, and I was excited, but that came with more problems because, like I said, I had never had a job before. So I didn't know, no one really prepared me for what comes with a job. When I was younger, I've always said, I want a job because I want freedom. I want to be able to buy a cup of coffee, buy a bagel, buy a game from GameStop, and not need my mom. Because growing up, we always bought everything on sale. If it wasn't on sale, we couldn't get it. That meant if I went to a store with my mom and I said, hey, can we get strawberries? She'd look at the price and be like, okay, it's $8. That's not on sale. And I remember asking her, what does that mean? And she said, it means that it's wholesale price and you're gonna be paying a lot of money. I can get this cheaper somewhere else. So we would just hop from store to store. And that meant going to 5 stores just to find strawberries on sale. That meant if I found a shirt I really liked, my mom would be like, well, that's not on sale. That's expensive. So I really wanted a job. But no one prepared me for the problems that come with having a job, like having a manager you don't like, trying to work alongside coworkers who are very different from you, different personality types. The coworker who doesn't like their job, the coworker who slacks off or is bossy. You know, you come across all these kinds of people. But I remember I worked at this one coffee shop and I got fired because the manager said I wasn't really like everyone else, and basically he felt like I wasn't a good fit. He said I would count the money again and again. Mind you, this was my first job. I've never counted that much money before, so it came with a lot of anxiety, insecurity, feeling like I'm not good enough. And I tried my best, but I remember getting fired, and he would say, you know, like whenever you get feedback, you compare it to your other job and you say how it's different. I think I had worked a previous job before this, but just consider this like one of my first jobs I've worked. And he was like, I feel really bad. You have an amazing personality. You get along with everyone. And in my mind, I'm like, so why are you doing this to me? But I started crying, and he wrote me a personal check and he added an extra $200 to it. And he said, okay, you know what? I know this sucks. Go home, be depressed if you want to, take a nap, but then the next day go out and look for jobs. So I did that. And then the next day I looked for jobs and I found another job like that. And it got easier with the more experience I got. But that was something I struggled with a lot, working in the food industry. These jobs are not that stable. The turnover rate is really high. A lot of times these jobs don't come with health benefits, 401k, dental, vision, pension. So a lot of times you can work somewhere for a few months and then you don't like it and you either get fired or you quit, and then like you're back at square one. So I went through that for a few months. my friend helped me open up a bank account. I had never had a bank account in my life. And again, this wasn't something I was taught growing up. So I remember her name was Maria. We worked at this French coffee shop together, and she mentioned direct deposit. I was like, I've heard of that, but I don't really know what it is. And she was like, oh, it's basically like you get paid electronically. So money is wired to your bank account instead of you having to come into the store and pick up a physical check. So I was like, I don't know how to do that. And she said, let's go. So we opened up a bank account, or she helped me open up a bank account. And I felt like I was learning things. Like she was teaching me how to save, how to budget. And it was also hard because, again, like I mentioned, it was me, my mom, and my sister. So there were times where my mom wasn't working. So I would give most of my check, or vice versa. My check from that job was $144.39 every week. So I was going to college full time, working like 2 or 3 days a week, trying to be man of the house and be responsible, but struggling because I remember like always trying to save money and feeling like I would come up here and then come back down here. So, and again, like I had a lot of trial and error. Like I've been fired from a few jobs before. I remember I saved up $1,000 and I got fired from this one cafe. And I really learned to never stay at one place just because it's comfortable. This was a job that I was at for 6 months. It was great at first, but a lot of us weren't trained properly. You couldn't really use the machine, the espresso machine, if you didn't know how to tamp properly, how to steam milk, and if you couldn't do latte art. So I saw like a lot of resentment at this one cafe. A lot of people were kind of against each other. Like there was this us versus them mindset. I would get transferred a lot. They moved me to a smaller store. I didn't like it. And I would come to work angry every day. So I understand why they fired me. But at the time, I just felt really miserable. But one thing that job taught me was to never stay somewhere where you're not happy. So I think in 2019, I moved out for the first time. Mind you, I had a lot of family drama. And if I would argue with my mom, she'd be like, get out my house. And I would be like, I have no money in my savings. I've spent the last 8 months helping you and my sister, so I don't have money in savings. I don't know how to look for an apartment. And it really forced me to get the gears turning. I found a roommate on, I believe it's Facebook Marketplace. And he used to go to this church that I went to, and that's how we connected. So I saved up as much as I could. I told him I cannot afford this if it's like $1,000+ and he said just pay $700. So I didn't pay my phone bill that month. I didn't pay my mom rent. I just saved up the money. I moved in with just enough. My mom gave me an extra $200, I believe, and I lived there for about 2 or 3 years. And like I said, you can get what you want in life, but then it comes with more struggles. So I was happy to have my independence, but I didn't realize, okay, you have to learn how to cook, save, budget. You also have $5,000 in credit card debt. Yeah, I owed a lot of money in debt. I moved into an apartment with debt and not much in savings. I could barely afford the rent because I would get paid bi-weekly. And I would have one check for my fun expenses, and then the final check of the month would go towards rent. And I didn't realize I should be budgeting. So you should take out money every time you get paid and save it for rent. I would just pay with one check like my coworker was doing. This is right before the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, it forced me to realize what I was doing wrong. I would do like a basic grocery shopping, and then I would go outside and not eat what I bought, because I would ask myself, why is my baby spinach spoiling? Why is the Greek yogurt going bad? Like, what's going on? And then I realized it's because I would spend all this money on bubble tea and coffee and food outside and probably only eat like once or twice a day in my own house. Because we were in lockdown, it forced me to look at my spending, budget, because I was getting paid to stay home because my coffee shop still paid us while we were home. And I started learning how to cook, how to make overnight oats, how to make vegetarian meals. And then I realized I wasn't eating the food that I bought. And that changed a lot. Like, I lost weight because I was working out. I would meal prep. I saved money. And I felt like I got a better grip of being an adult. Because before, when I first moved out, I was just spending money like crazy. I wasn't thinking about the fact that I have to pay rent. I would kind of forget that my rent existed. But one thing I learned is that you can make anything you buy outside at home. So that's one of the best things I learned during the pandemic. Like, I learned how to make my own coffee at home. I learned how to make bubble tea at home. I learned how to cook salmon and rice. And when the pandemic kind of calmed down a bit, we went back to work. I ended up owing a lot of money in taxes. And I told my mom, and she was like, just come back. So I ended up moving back in with her, because not only was I struggling to pay rent, I was also living with a hoarder. And it was my first roommate experience. I kind of felt trapped there, because I'm like, I finally moved out. If I move back with my mom, I'm going backwards. So I felt kind of depressed for a bit. Like, why can't I just move up in life? But I realized so many people are in this boat where we are in our 30s living with our parents. And right now, I feel like I wish I knew what I knew now. Like, I wish I knew how to meal prep. Because if I was meal prepping the way I am now, back then, I would have been able to afford my rent. I wouldn't have felt like I was drowning in expenses. But I realized a lot of this happened because I moved out in a rush. I think if you can help it, you should save as much as you can before you move out. I think 3K to 6K is good if you're looking to move out on your own. If you're looking to move in with a roommate, maybe you don't need that much money, but you should at least have enough money for 3 months of rent when you first move in. You should have a savings account. I think you should have credit cards with enough spending limit. So if you do have an emergency and you don't have savings, or you can't touch savings, you can use your credit card. These are things I didn't know. No one ever taught me, but I learned it through moving out. So sometimes I do get down on myself, because I'm like, there are so many adults, especially other men, who are on their own, or they have a girlfriend, or they live on their own, and they're not with their family. They work a good job. They have their own studio apartment. And I would be like, why the hell am I not like that? Like, why am I with my mom? But my mom used to always say, their day today, my day tomorrow. Your tomorrow can actually be next week, next month, or next year. But just know that it's coming. If you look at someone and admire them, you can say, okay, I want to be like them. And then you ask them questions. How can I get this job? Or how did you get to where you are now? How did you get your own apartment? How did you save up 2K? That's more holistic. If you look at someone with envy and you're like, why am I not like you? Then you kind of doubt yourself and you're stuck in this loop. And that's kind of how I was for about 2 years. Like, wasn't happy with my body. I wasn't happy with myself. I wasn't happy with my spending habits or my money. I just always felt like I wasn't good enough. Some of this could have been from upbringing, some of this could have just been from being bullied in high school. But I realized that no one really has it figured out. Like, it's okay to make mistakes along the way. Yeah, I've realized that it's okay to make mistakes. I'm a late bloomer. I moved out for the first time when I was 25, I think. I got my first job at 19. I lost my virginity in my 30s. I didn't start dating until I was in my mid 20s to early 30s. I don't have a car. I don't have a driver's license. I don't have a passport. Some of these things aren't that necessary in New York, but they're things that I want to work towards. But I just keep telling myself, like, one step at a time, because if you didn't grow up doing certain things, like, people always ask me, why haven't you traveled? That wasn't a thing in my culture. My grandma didn't travel, my mom didn't travel, I didn't travel. So it's not that I'm against it, it's just certain things just weren't really encouraged growing up. And I don't think people realize if having a car or having a passport isn't really suggested or encouraged or pushed in your house, you're gonna go through life thinking, well, I don't need that. That's kind of how I was for the past 10 years. I didn't think I needed certain things. Like, even moving out, I didn't think I needed to move out at any point because no one ever taught me or talked about it. I was just kind of stuck working, giving money to my mom, and that's it. So that's where I'm at now. I've learned a lot and I'm still learning, but if you're living with your parents again, don't feel bad about yourself because it's really common. A lot of people are living with their parents again. Inflation and the cost of living just keeps getting higher. So back in the day, like when our parents were younger, it was much easier for them to look for an apartment and be okay. But now, like, especially being a millennial, it's really hard to look for an apartment, find a roommate. Most of us are looking for roommates. A lot of our parents didn't live with roommates. They, like in my family, a lot of my relatives live in low income housing. So basically they lower or raise your rent according to what you're making. But a lot of people aren't going that route. Like, that's not the route I want to take. So it might take a little longer, and I think that's okay. But I just want to tell people, be kind to yourself, because I think as long as you take it one step at a time, you'll be okay. It's very overwhelming when I look at apartments. When I look on Facebook Marketplace, I'm like, I'm never gonna afford that, or like, I don't have the money. You don't get abs in 1 week. You don't lose weight in 1 week. Like, everything is a process. So that's pretty much my advice. This was a very impromptu video. I didn't have a script. I don't have anything pre-written out, but let me know what your thoughts are. I want to know if anyone else is in this same situation, or if you were in a situation, how did you get out of it and how did you stay positive? That's pretty much it. Thanks for watching.